Okay, welcome to day one of NDC London. It's really weird because it's on a Monday and not a Wednesday, which seems very odd to me. I still can't get my head around it. It means that PubConf is weirdly at the end of the week when people who've been at the conference aren't here, so that's a bit of an issue for PubConf, but there you are. But you can't have PubConf on a Wednesday because everyone will have a hangover who's meant to be at doing the workshops on Thursday and Friday, so that's why that's happened. I'm just going to make sure that everyone's in the right room, because that's always worth doing. Hence, this is talking about incident management, with how you, as probably technical guys, engineering team, can handle incidents and convince the rest of your company that it's not only you who handles incidents and things like that, and how to cope without freaking out. I'm head of engineering at a company called Free Market FX. We're a fintech based near London Bridge, so for us, incidents are quite important. We're regulated and all sorts of things. Free market allow me to do conference prep and conferences in paid time, hence we put the logo up. We're also hiring. I'm actually not at work on a day that 2 developers are starting today, which is really annoying for them. But we're still hiring people, so if anyone is interested who's back-end server engineer type thing in C#.net and is interested in changing jobs, have a chat with me later. So this is the curious incident in your software in the daytime. If you didn't already know, it's based on a book called The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. This is therefore the most tortured title for a presentation I have ever done. And I must stop doing it because it's a terrible idea. As people who were in the agenda committee said, what an awful title. But I kept it. Has anyone read this book? So there's a load of people who haven't read this book. For those who ask questions at the end, I have swag, which is the book. I have 10 copies. Secondhand on Amazon is a wonderful thing. It's an incredibly good book, right? So I would say that as developers, if you're a developer, that will give you an extra edge to enjoying this book. I won't say more than that. So anyone who asks questions, you'll get first choice. After that, you can just come up and collect one. So the first thing we have to discuss is what is an incident, because I've used that as a kind of title. It's something that interrupts your system or your service, right? That means customers could be affected, which is the big thing that everyone worries about. I might have a customer who can't use my website, can't use my software, but it also could be the faults that you've got are causing trouble in the company. The customers might not know, but certainly inside the company, you're aware of them, and it's causing other departments to be under pressure. Or we could be starting to trigger all sorts of regulatory stuff, right? If you're a finance company, you're probably regulated by things like the FCA. If you're in healthcare, and in the US, you've got the HIPAA Act. In the EU or in the UK, we're still under GDPR. So if you have certain things happen, you've got to tell the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office. And you have deadlines at which you're meant to tell these regulators. Or it might be just reputational. If you are a company who's meant to be secure and you're handling people's money, which we are as a fintech, the last thing you need is something happened and someone got their money stolen, you know, because that would be really damaging for us. So we don't want that to happen. So it's kind of, why should you care? Right. We all know that you can put firewalls in, malware, loads of secure things, scan your emails. We can have cloud services. We can do them in availability zones. We might be multi-regional cloud. We might even, my God, have stuff in AWS and Azure just in case, because your life wasn't hard enough to start with. And you'll have loads of backup plans, loads of stuff, right? So you're kind of going, it'll never go wrong, right? But it will. At some point, something will go wrong. And that's the point at which you want to have the following things. And one of them is a plan, right? An idea of what you would do if something happened, which probably tells you where to organize people and get them together. and have them talk to each other. You will probably have a contact list so that you can actually ring important people. And really importantly, you'll have already thought of how you're going to tell customers or third parties what's happening. And what that means is not one of the engineers in charge of the API gets called up by a tech guy from one of your customers about the API. It's not that they know how to chat to each other. It's they know exactly how to respond to it with kind of pre-prepared messages. And because you might have a regulator, they'll probably want this written up afterwards, and a description of what happened and what you did about it. Now, why? So that's a why should you care? Because you want to have these, but why should you care in the real world? Guess what? A security operation that's happening in Eastern Europe has caused warnings to come out about the fact that given that Western countries are putting sanctions on Russia, there's a really high chance that we're going to try and get hacked. And that'll be government institutions, but it'll be commercial as well. So there's been massive numbers of documents coming out from the NCA in America, but also GCHQ saying you're probably about to get hacked. So you've got to be ready for that. And if it isn't hackers, it could be just, hey, you're British Airways and you allow 380,000 customers to have their credit card details snaffled because of 22 lines of JavaScript that you didn't make sure was secure, right? That's quite a reputational damage at that point. It's also quite a high cost because if you actually work out, if 380,000 people need to change their credit cards and get new credit cards issued, that's probably a minimum of 5 million quid down the drain for the economy of just generating new cards, sending them out, processing them, and getting them done. You could argue that BA, obviously, it would be a reputational impact. It's 4 years ago. In the meantime, they've managed to sack loads of staff in the coronavirus, find out they've sacked too many staff, not had enough planes, and all sorts of other things that have done reputational damage to BA that probably are way worse than this. But if you were handling credit card payments and suddenly they're out in the public, you'd be upset about it. So what is an incident? It's a bit boring, this one, because it kind of comes from the kind of policy documents we have to create. So hacking, mainly external. You might have internal people trying to hack data out of your system. That's quite possible. Unauthorized use of systems for processing of data, which sounds really weird. That's a USB key with a load of email personal details on, or it's shadow IT. So someone decided to export everything out of the CRM and put it into this new tool for marketing. They haven't cleared it with anyone. Who knows where the data's stored? That's a GDPR breach waiting to happen. So all those kind of things. So that's why I say it's normally internal or third parties who get involved at this point who are causing the problem. Then you've got the people like the hackers who are going to actually try to put your website out of action. And they'll be going for denial of service or overloading your servers. The platform having performance issues, this could be your code, but it might not be. It might be Azure or AWS who are having performance issues, and that affects you. It might be ISPs, and it might be things like DNS resolution, like Cloudflare. So, or it may really be we have certain chunks of our systems that aren't working properly because, you know, part of our system relies on third parties who do sanction checking, they do fraud checking, and we talk to banks, various banks. If one of those goes down, that's a chunk of the system being unavailable for our customers. Not all of it, but it could be quite crucial for some of our customers. And the other thing to remember is they might not be technical. The non-technical component that's most common involves a pub and a laptop, and the two things remaining together while the person who owns the laptop goes home. Right? If you're lucky, it remained in the pub. If you're unlucky, someone has it, and it's no longer in the pub. And that's one of the major things. And although it's got a technical component, this is a human thing, and that can cause an incident. And the really boring bit about incidents with laptops in pubs is you find out at about 1 in the morning, that someone's left that laptop in a pub. You don't find out early on when it would be most useful. So yeah, so what kind of things have happened recently? I think I was going for. Well, we have GitHub. Did anyone get an email from GitHub in February? No one? Because we did. Apparently, they wanted to do some metadata analysis on GitHub pages, which is the kind of mini websites in GitHub repos. And they included private repos, which shouldn't be public. But it was done with urlscan.io that published what repos it was looking at and put the words in. And you could search for what terms were in the URI. So GitHub published the URI to your private GitHub pages in a meta-analysis data tool. And the way you found out about it is GitHub emailed you and told you, by the way, you've got these sites, these were scanned, there's a possibility that that's now public information. You might want to go and have a check. And then, who uses Jira or Confluence? Who breathed a sigh of relief in April when Atlassian didn't talk to them? Right? Right? Does everyone know about this, who's got Jira or Confluence? Right? Basically, this information, the top 2 paragraphs come from the engineering blog from Atlassian. They actually permanently deleted 400 customer accounts. Right? Everything that was in Jira and Confluence got removed from their cloud service. Right? And it took them 2 weeks to get it back. Right? They had it on backups, but they're only ever used to restoring 1 customer's data from a backup, never 400. And it's quite a hard thing to do. They haven't automated it. It takes time. If you want to know how serious this is, they translated that blog into 11 additional languages. That's how concerned they were. So the interesting bit about this, for those people who've got Jira and Confluence, how do you back that up? You don't, because you can't. Because I researched this before this happened and said, the one bad thing we have in our organization at the moment is Jira and Confluence, because all the stuff in it has no way of backing it up. You can get, yes, you could have your own Jira Confluence server on site, but that's another set of problems you now have, especially as we are a cloud-only company, as in the only thing we have that's physically kind of owned by FreeMarketFX is a printer scanner in the office. Everything else is cloud-based. We do not have a server anywhere. So everything's in the cloud. But to be honest, it is an issue Atlassian have got. They need to be able to export in some form a backup that you could restore to somewhere else. And that's something that I think they're going to get pushed to do soon, because regulatory-wise, that's a bit of an issue. You know, the kind of thing that EU is starting to mandate, that you've got to be able to move things between services. So that is quite scary, because if you lost Confluence, say Confluence is the place you had your plan for an incident, and that's the only place you have it, you now don't have it. So now you can't even look up the thing to deal with the thing, which is, so annoying. So how many people in this room do have an incident plan? So if I swap it around, how many people don't have an incident plan? Right, so I will call you that kind of person, right? So this is you at the moment, probably that one at the end, because he looks more worried or anything. He's just thinking, don't know. And then one day the phone will go for you, and suddenly you won't look like that anymore. You'll look like right? And you'll be screaming why into the void. Did we not have some planning ahead of this? You know, and realistically, that's just kind of quite a lot of companies I've worked for are like that. It should be noted, by the way, that that is obviously copyright material, including in this presentation. Therefore, I have now included color bars for the video editor who can copy this chunk of video over the top of the minions for when this goes on YouTube. So I think this is long enough for an edit point. Right. The important thing here is a plan is not just for creating a pretty PDF, and it's not just for giving a regulator. It's not a tick box. One of the things I used to be in was kind of system administration at GMTV, the breakfast TV channel in the UK. And one of the things we said is you don't have a backup until you've restored from it. This is in the days that backups were on tapes. And they were on a thing called a DAT tape. Now, DAT was an audio format, but they went and smuggled this into the IT sector and put data on it. And it worked the same way as another old thing, video cassette recorders, in that it had a spinning head, wound the tape around it, and that's how it managed to get so much information on this tiny little tape. Those drives used to gradually change where the head was. It just kind of got old and worn, and it kind of moved a bit. To the point where the only thing that could ever restore from a tape is the original drive that had written that tape, which means if your building burnt down and you got your offsite backup, it probably can't be read anymore. Right? So unless you are going to restore on a different device, you weren't really testing it. I still have the same view of cloud backups of SQL databases. Even though it's all in the cloud, even though it's supposedly secure, we have scripts that every week restore backups, put them on a different database and check that it all works and that we're doing it correctly and that actually was there and the backup was the most recent and things like that. So equally, for an incident, you don't have a plan if you've never rehearsed it or used it, right? The plan is a fantasy thing. And it's not just disaster recovery. So we're not just talking of, building going on fire or the whole of Azure's down. The only thing we're moving is tech. Is you've got to get the whole business involved. So that's a half day of everyone's time going through an exercise where you pretend that your data has been hacked or you're pretending that you've got a denial of service attack. And what will all the departments do? What do the operations team tell the banks? What are the commercial team going to tell customers? What would the marketing guys put out as emails? You don't actually send them, you just rehearse it all. And you test them regularly. The really good thing about real incidents, apart from they keep everyone kind of aware that incidents can happen, is you get to practice real things, and then the rehearsals can actually be used for the things that don't happen in real life. So tailor your rehearsals to the things you haven't done in the last, say, 6 months or so. But the question is it an incident? Well, the most important bit is make it really easy for anyone in your company to report an incident. So make sure that anyone thinks that they can go at any point, I think there's something really suspicious happening, I need to tell people. The really good news for us in new starters, because we've been discussing it quite a lot in the last 3 months, is just even a phishing email that was pretending to come from the CEO got someone to report it immediately to the security guys, check it out, only went to one person. It's not really an incident because it's only targeting one person, so we're not going to say it's wide-ranging. Reporting an incident does not make it an incident. Really important. So it's okay for someone to say, hey, I think there's an incident, because it won't necessarily become an incident, because it might not be kind of severe enough. There are reasons you would get concerned about making it a formal incident, to do with timelines to regulators. So you're always going to be cautious about elevating it up to what the impact is. In terms of financial security, you are talking about the most severe being hours to the financial regulators, going down to days or weeks for GDPR and ICO types. So you've just got to be aware that you're going to be required to tell people about this and try and automate it as much as possible. So things like Teams or Slack or whatever Google has. I haven't used Google services so long, I don't know. It used to be Hangouts or something, but it might have got a new name. Something like that to organize people. Make sure you've got these pre-prepared email and social media templates ready to go, and that phone numbers are easily accessible. This is an interesting one because people go, I need to be told I'm high up the organization, and they may be C-level, and you go, can you please put your mobile phone on Slack so that we can ring you? And they go, oh, I don't want my mobile phone available to everyone in the company. And that's what you're paid for, and you're part of the incident response team, right? So unfortunately, your mobile phone's going to end up on Slack. If people abuse it, you can deal with that a different way. But it's not a great idea to hide your phone number at that point. So how do you make it easy to report an incident? So this is how we've done it inside of Free Market. We use Slack quite heavily. So we've gone for doing a workflow in Slack. The interesting thing is that Slack has something called Slack workflows, which are really, really nice things. So you might think, oh, I've got to create an add-in or a bot for my chat. No, you don't. It's a Slack workflow. The first version of this workflow was created by Matt in our commercial team, who just did it in the afternoon and said, here's how you do it, and handed it over. And I looked at it and went, well, it needs tweaking, but my God, that involved no code at all. I looked for add-ins for Slack and couldn't find them, or found them and then went, that won't work, and then we did the workflow. So we tell everyone, you go into the general channel that everyone's in. Nothing to do with incidents, hit the plus, which is what they're used to doing if they're going to make a call or do fancy things. And there we are, report an incident, which puts up a form. And you put in a field that they can fill in with possibly pre-populated ones like urgency, 1 hour, today, next week, boom, boom, boom. Trying to get people to write something useful. When they hit submit, bang, this message gets put into a channel called incident management. Not only that, in the general channel, we also have a thing saying, Liam's just reported an incident. You can find out more about it in the incident management channel. So everyone who was in general now has a link to an incident channel, which they didn't know existed. Can fire off, go off there. It also puts one in a tech-only channel, so that the tech team have just spotted a notification going through. And we also, and this is the clunkiest bit, directly message in Slack the user who reported it saying, please can you send this to an email, the email distribution list, and just copy in what you just reported. And the reason you have to do that is because Slack believe that email is old-fashioned and not the future and will not allow you to send an email from it in a workflow, right? Because they're convinced that you're meant to do everything in Slack. So we couldn't actually do that. You can put an email in, and if you click it, it'll open your mail client, which is nearly there, except they don't support the query strings that would allow you to pre-populate the subject and all the nice stuff, but would have made it very easy. So, but it works, and we actually did a load of online teaching for how to use this process, and within 2 weeks, someone who was junior in the company reported an incident following the exact process, absolutely worked how it was meant to work, and it wasn't an incident, so it was great. And we saw people join the incident channel because they'd seen the message in general and joined the channel to have a look at it. And then they can leave that channel when the incident's over, and then it isn't cluttering up their Slack. So it's a really neat trick.
Question.
Yes?
Is there a Slack book that you can use to have, when it sees a message, send an email? I think you can do it the other way, but not that way.
We could have something watch Slack for a message turning up, and then it could probably send an email, and we could write that, yeah. And we'd probably write that as a little job in the background that we could write. We're kind of taking this as an agile process, like software. We've had the first couple of incidents reported via it. We can now work out what works and what doesn't, what would be happier. Currently, they haven't had a problem sending the email with a bit of data in, at which point it's a very expensive dev time when we've got other things to do, was the kind of view that we had. So interestingly, in the whole of this, in our quick guide is, one of the comments is, if Slack's down, we'll do all this in Teams, it'll be harder, right? Because we haven't automated this all in Teams because, you know, Slack, I'll mention that later, because Slack has gone down recently, and that was a bit of an issue for us. So the first thing you're trying to do in an incident is get everyone together. Now, obviously, when you had on-site and everyone was in an office, you could grab everyone and just move into a room or something, or to the table in the middle of the room and start chatting about it. By the way, that was awful because that meant everything was off the record, right? So it wasn't the best way of discussing it in a way. So what we have is a single channel open to the whole company where they can look at what's happening in the incident, add to it, say, yeah, it's affecting my customers. Yeah, actually, I've got a report from someone else. All of it piles into one place. Then you might have a different channel for doing the tech discussion. So maybe you don't want all the sales guys to know exactly what's gone wrong in the database or what exact fault is in Azure. So, because we're completely in Azure ourselves. But the other great bit is, this is such a boon for when you have to write the document afterwards. Someone has to write that incident report. You will cut and paste the Slack straight into a document and then tidy it up into what the key timeline was. And as long as you don't use a Slack huddle, evil thing that it is, and you use a call, which we've highlighted, please use calls, you get a name, you get a list of who was in the call, right? Huddles don't do that because they're ad hoc and you're not meant to really audit them. So Teams is super uber geeky and tells you everything about it, and you can download an attendance report into an Excel spreadsheet for every Teams meeting. It's really freaky. It's like Big Brother or something. So they're really handy later on. And the other thing you want to do is actually, you want to keep some people separate, right? So what you want to do is probably have that engineering tech channel. And the engineers, developers, tech ops, QAs could all chat inside that channel, work out what they're doing, that kind of thing. We'll nominate an engineering contact, which will end up being me, pretty much, because I would probably be useless at looking at the code because I'm not close enough to the code base. And I will take information from that Slack channel and feed it to the rest of the company. What you do not want is someone going, is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? From everyone in the company. I've done that in person at Huddle, where I stood behind two sysops guys, technical operations guys. We lost mirroring between SQL servers at one point because they weren't trusting the certificates correctly. They were rebuilding it as I was watching them. Someone was on the phone going, how are they doing? You need to ask them. I goes, I'm behind them. I can see what they're doing. I'm not going to bother them. Right? Please leave them alone. Well, believe me, when they've fixed it, they're going to yell across the office at me that they've now got it back. So you buffer that. And similarly, we decided at Free Market we're going to have a business contact, which could be either someone talking to the banks, maybe, if it's a banking problem, or liaising with our customers, if it's a straight-up commercial thing, or it could be one of our third-party compliance systems having an issue, so that'll be our risk team. They'll update the rest of the company on what's happening there as well. So it's kind of fending people off in a way to allow people to actually do the work of fixing the incident and dealing with it. And while all this is happening, you've probably got to talk to people outside your company. So what you really want is commercial team and marketing to be the guys talking, right? I would not advise a junior developer to try and explain what's happening to a customer, because that would be a bad thing. There are two things they could do. Well, they could say, yeah, our software's got this massive bug in it. We're going to fix it. Not good, because they may not have got that right. The other thing they could do is, oh, it's all the fault of Microsoft, because it's their Azure thing that's gone wrong, at which point someone could then go, Microsoft's gone all funny on social media, and then Microsoft go, wasn't us, can you stop saying that? So that's a bad thing as well. I've once, nothing to do with the IT side of things, I worked at GMTV, the TV company broadcasts its stuff by microwave link from London all around the country. So they have microwave link on BT Tower all the way to Birmingham. That's how people in the Midlands get their television in the morning via this microwave link. We have really rough weather. It's hot, sunny, kind of thundery, hazy. It's going to possibly interfere with that microwave link. So we've got every chance that we're going to lose a bit of the broadcast in that region. And we have to tell people on you may be having problems due to the weather. And I stupidly said to someone, because I was young, I said, yeah, it's the BT tower to thingy. And they goes, oh, right, so we can blame BT. Don't do that. Please don't do that. BT are much bigger than GMTV. However big you think you are, 18 million viewers or 15 million viewers, BT's much bigger, and they can afford not to have us as a customer, and they are the only people who can do this for us. So that's why you don't want to just let information leak out like that. And one thing we don't have at the moment, We don't have a status page at Free Market. If you have one, get that updated as soon as possible. How many people look at AWS's or Azure's status page and find it says everything's okay, and you know damn well it isn't, and it takes about 20 minutes before it goes red, and then by the time it's gone red, they've actually fixed it, and it's kind of really useless, that status page sometimes. So, and definitely, if it's long running, you want to do a technical advisory on what you think the timescale is to fix and get that out to your customers. And at the end, definitely tell people it's over, right? When you're happy that definitely this is over, I can tell people, get it out there, because that's positive, right? Really nice positive stuff. The other positive thing is to tell people afterwards as well. So that incident report that you're going to have to send to a regulator, probably, you also want to probably get ready to send it out to customers as well. As long as it hasn't got something highly sensitive, maybe you've got a different one for the regulator that's a bit more in depth, you trim it back for it to go to a customer, but send the customers. You want to be as open and honest as possible, and I'm going to discuss an incident at Huddle, and we'll go through exactly what happened and how we dealt with this. And maybe tell customers who haven't even been affected, and tell them, by the way, we had this happen, didn't affect you at all, but hey, that we've now put this in place, so that if this same event happened again, we wouldn't have any effect on any of our customers. And that's pretty much what Atlassian, I think they might have sent an email out saying, by the way, you didn't get affected. You know, it's a good idea to send that out, because otherwise people are going to find out anyway off IT websites and then go, why didn't you tell us? You know, you had this problem. And yeah, the regulators will want a load of information, unfortunately, for the people in the company. So how does it work in practice? So this is a very real world thing that I had to cope with. So we're at Huddle, and the marketing department, or PR marketing, got a call from the BBC, from a technology editor at the BBC. In fact, this technology editor, Chris Fox, who said, I was using Huddle because the BBC was a customer of Huddle. Huddle was secure document collaboration, and said, I went in, I logged in, and when I logged in, I got to look at KPMG France. Ooh, that's not good. You're meant to be seeing the BBC. Being a good reporter, what he did was screenshot it and then immediately log out to prove that what he'd been able to see, but could blur out all the files. The PR department was going, right, he's going to publish this within the next X hours. Can't remember how many hours it was going to be, but it was going to be that day. To which, unbelievably, certain people went, he's really mean. I can't believe he's going to do that. And you're going, he's a journalist. You are lucky he's given you 4 or 5 hours to cope with this, right? Because it was our software that did this to him. That wasn't like him trying to hack us. So what happened was, and this is virtually what was written on that website, which you can still see on the BBC because they keep a good archive. So you had to actually go to the login server in 20 milliseconds. And by the way, that's the same login server out of 4 different web servers, because there were 4 web servers at the time handling all the requests. And you'd have to be issued with the same authorization code, because you would be if you got there exactly in that 20 millisecond window. You use that authorization code to get a security token. This is no auth type flow. And when both users presented the authorization code, whoever's fastest got the token. And then you logged in as that user. So as the first user, worse. So you had a 50-50 chance of going in as you anyway, but you had a 50-50 chance of going in as someone else. If there was 20 milliseconds, blah, blah, blah. So there's a whole list of things that cause this to happen. So clearly, the contact point at this point was the PR department, who said, what the hell's going on? Engineering team, what's happening? So that, straight away, that's an incident channel. There's no debating that we've now got a live incident because someone from the BBC just logged into KPMG. So we immediately ran up an incident channel. At Huddle, we had incident channels named for every incident in particular. They were archived off and then documented elsewhere. We might do that at free market. At the moment, we run an open channel that has all incidents in it, and we'll see how it goes. Again, it's an agile process, and you see what works and what would improve it. The chief architect, Ian Cooper, who some people may know because he speaks at this conference and does workshops. Ian Cooper was on it immediately, talking to the team of how this could have happened. How do you think someone could access it? So they're into the logs. They're looking at APIs coming from BBC. They know what the kind of token that would have got issued for this person. They're looking it up. What they find is, yep, this is exactly what happened. We got 2 people given the same authorization code. It must have been in this bit of the code base. Developers are on that bit of the code base in identity, OAuth. And what they find is that there was a shared state, basically. It was an IOC problem, right? Singleton versus not singleton, which is one of the classic things in the world of software. So the important bit was, that we went in. So the developers isolated it within about 2 hours. You could find it. And they were then fixing it, and then regression tested it, and within 4 hours it was shut. So that was gone. Not only that, that was the first thing. The next thing you trigger, which kind of was already in action but would have come from the incident report anyway, so that's our short-term fix is, it's definitely here. We're going to fix this. We're going to get rid of this singleton IOC issue we've got, which calls shared state, so that 2 people got the same tokens. And what we will now do as a long-term thing is go around every library in our code base, checking every singleton IOC instance and checking whether it should be a singleton being shared amongst all the users on that web server, and check that there are no other cases where this could be a problem. So that's actually your medium-term solution, which within another 2 days, we'd released another version of the software that fixed 2 or 3 other places with singletons. Long-term was, how do we put something, the most awful word that's in crypto and security, a nonce, which is a unique once-only value, number once is what it stands for. In the UK vernacular, a bad term to be using, but everyone understands it. So how could we hand out this unique number to anyone coming to the website, which means that when they go from an authorization code to get the token, they go unique number, authorization code, they were never handed out together. So there's no way that's the right thing. So that's our long-term solution done. So we've got short-term, medium, long-term, we can document all that. We then analyzed, during all this, it was analyzing, well, we worked out how it happened. We worked out how to find out that people had shared tokens. So now we'll go over everything that's happened. And the change to singleton had only happened in March. So that's fine. So we have a time window where that singleton had been instantiated. So it's March and November, nearly 5 million logins, and 6 people got shared tokens. So, and people go, how come the other people didn't tell us that they got logged into the wrong place? And you go, because they're users, and all they did was close the browser, start again, and go, that was odd, and then carry on doing their day job. You could argue that we were unlucky to get a BBC reporter who immediately went, ooh, I'll take a screen grab of this because it's quite a tasty story. Or we're really lucky we got a BBC reporter, so it didn't carry on, so someone malicious didn't eventually get in there. Right? I think I'd be happier that a BBC guy found it. We also had an entire discussion about how honest are we going to be about what happened. So half the engineering team, or this is the interesting bit, is the architects, which I was part of the architect team, were pretty keen on telling customers exactly what the problem was, telling the BBC exactly what the problem was, how it got fixed, and doing technical details. Some of the development team, the younger ones, said, I don't think we should really tell people because it's how our software is implemented. And we went, no, we need to tell people because otherwise it just seems like you're hiding it. And we also reached out to customers who weren't even affected. So they'd probably read that kind of story because it's on the BBC site saying, Huddle, the secure file system isn't very secure, is it? You know, it's a good headline. It's on all the IT things. So we talked to government departments, or rather, the commercial team did, and said, we've analyzed 5 million logins, only 6 users. None of them are you. Your stuff was never accessed. We've analyzed it all. no documents were accessed by someone outside of your organization. Those customers were incredibly grateful because who we're talking to is probably the champion for huddle in that government department, who will be asked by someone, hey, there was this thing happened in huddle, and if they can immediately go, no, it didn't affect us, and we found out it only affected these, and they've proven it, and they've shown us records, so it's fine. So their job is made much easier by us talking to them. So that was huddle. What have I had in 2.5 years at free market? SQL Azure. It's really interesting. Has anyone got SQL Azure databases, right? And you have a server that they live on, but that server isn't real, right? It's a virtual server. It owns the master DB, and that's about it. Your databases are probably on multiple pieces of hardware, right? Depending on what power you've made them and how many CPUs and memory. We know this because we had some of our databases go AWOL and disappear, and some not. So they were clearly on different physical pieces of hardware, even though they were on the same server in Azure. The great thing is, if you've got a regional failover group, you just pop it over. Everyone moves over to the other region, which for us is you can move everyone from Dublin over to Amsterdam, and all the software goes, oh, couldn't get to the database, retry, oh, I can now. And they all move over. So we did a support thing. It was having memory faults, apparently. So in the Azure support ticket, they admitted we had memory faults. Effectively, it blue screened. When we rebooted it, it blue screened again. They eventually probably migrated it off that piece of hardware. But if you go and look at one of the pages on Azure about support and regional failover, it says you should not rely on SQL databases in a single data center. Your data will be secure on storage, but your server may go down, including if a network cable is inadvertently cut. That wording is on an Azure page on Microsoft support. That means it's happened because they wouldn't write that unless someone accidentally cut a network cable to a server in their data center, right? So it happens. The cloud is not a beautiful thing that keeps everything alive. It's something that makes your life a lot easier, but you should expect at any point for someone idiotically to take the power out of a rack, right? Even worse than that was there was a regional outage, and I think I've got a screenshot of this. The whole of UK South disappeared, right, about 2 years ago. That's a paired region with UK West disappearing. So even if you're in availability zones, they claim that if you had an availability zone, which is something inside a region where physically you're in separate buildings, theoretically, on separate power supplies and separate cooling, you shouldn't be affected. But I swear people were affected, even if they were in different availability zones. Slack, this. February 22nd, I virtually, before we actually had formally tested our incident plans, I effectively said, this is pretty much an incident for us. Slack's just gone down. The whole company talks on Slack. We've got Teams, but everyone's not used to it. So I immediately went off to Teams, set up a channel and went, right, everyone talk here as if it's general in Slack, and just pinged everyone in the world. We use Slack really heavily at free market because our customers use it to monitor transactions in the system. So they're invited to Slack channels, and they can see live data of how they're pushing transactions through the system. And someone said, but don't they look at their emails? I goes, no, they look at Slack, mate. They're young, they're under 30, you know. They don't do emails. All right, the only reason we do an email out of Slack for incidents is for people like me and the higher ups, because everyone else wants it on Slack anyway. And we have other things. We have service monitors. We have error logs going into Slack. Slack being down is actually quite a bad thing for us. Luckily, I think it only lasted about an hour, but it was really patchy, and then it kind of resurrected itself. And we really should, in our plans for this year, is how do we publish to Teams and Slack at the same time? The kind of data that we're publishing to Slack, so that if ever Slack's not available, we just go to Teams. However much everyone hates Teams, however much it doesn't do reply threads, there's a load of stuff wrong with Teams. But if you have nothing, it's better than nothing. And that's what we had at that point when Slack disappeared. So it's really kind of thing that any security guy will show you is yet more use real world cases of what have happened in the past. Cloudflare. This has become one of the most important things in the world. This is the thing that does DNS. When this went down, loads of things disappeared off the internet because no one knew how to get to them, right? So it's not even the cloud suppliers you're worried about. It's the network infrastructure at the heart of the internet could go down and take you out. So these things are quite a nightmare. The actual instance of UK South going, and that was, yeah, September 2020. We were already kind of semi-regional failover. This prompted us to really get a regional failover. Not because we were in UK South, we were in Dublin and Amsterdam, but why would it not happen in Dublin or Amsterdam, right? Seriously, could happen. So one of our banking partners told us it had happened in UK South. One tiny bit of their infrastructure was slightly degraded, so it wasn't out completely for them, but it did affect their ability to process stuff. Basically, they stopped being able to cool the building and had to turn everything off, right, before it caught fire, you know, that kind of thing. So that could happen to your data center, no problem. The other interesting one is it prompted us to do an entire look at how we do regional failover, and we had it working within about 6 weeks of that. We now have regional failover and just flip it over between Dublin and Amsterdam. That was the interim solution. The real solution is run it live in both all the time, right? So we're going to go to live running, where we're running in Amsterdam and Dublin. Here's one of the things which will become more clear when I... who's got AWS? Has anyone got AWS in the US? And when you hear UK East 1, I already knew it was Virginia, right? Because this is the oldest AWS in the US. It's the biggest, and it's the bloody most unreliable thing in the world, right? That goes down really regularly, right? It did not take a lot of searching to find an instance recently that AWS had an outage in North Virginia, because it's just old and creaky, you know? So the interesting bit is when this happens, you go, I'm okay, I've got a regional failover plan, or I've got a DR plan. Normally DR plan more than a proper regional balance. And you go, the only problem with DR is it's only about quarter the power of, you know, our production instance, because we aren't running live and we're just kind of keeping it warm, ready to go. And they say, so what happens if you had to fail over? Well, we'll just add more services. Might be quite tricky, because at the exact time that you're trying to add more services in AWS West, everyone else who was in East is now trying to do that. And you won't have any resources to add, because everyone will have already got to it, because you won't have been fast enough. So I would highly advise, if you can do it, run live, because then you at least be on 50% resources, which probably allows your business to kind of carry on and stutter a bit, but it won't be out, whereas a quarter is really deadly, or an eighth. So what are my takeaways from all this yapping? Press the button twice, that's one of them. Have a plan, right? Just have a plan, and rehearse it a bit. And it's just somewhere to keep everyone. And get everyone to put their mobile phone numbers in so that it can be contacted, because at some level, if they're not available on Slack because they've missed the Slack call, or they've missed the email, the chances are they'll answer the bloody phone. That's the one they will answer. And sometimes, because you've got their mobile, you can get them on WhatsApp. And unbelievably, WhatsApp gets answered more than any business thing, because it could be the parents group or their kid, right? And have something prepared that you can tell customers and third parties, and keep that record so that you can document it afterwards, and be open and as honest as possible, because customers will appreciate it if you're honest with them about everything that happened. I learned that at Huddle. It's never going to stop, because that's the way forward to get trust with customers, is to be open about if things go wrong. So that was the curious incident in the software in the daytime, the most torturous title I've ever done in my life. So has anyone got any questions? Some people have asked questions already, so they've already got a book. Have you? If I throw it at you and miss, it ends up with an incident, health and safety incident. That's the worrying bit. I have seen someone get hit with a CD in an audience, and it really hurt. Go on.
Do you see a value in having named incident managers on these calls? We've had sort of incidents, internal stuff that's not been sort of reported out. It's just been a flood of people on a Teams channel.
Yeah.
With no sort of people asking questions all the time. And
Right. The bit that isn't in that flow, because I hadn't got a screenshot of it that I could use, is we immediately put in a message at the top of the incident management channel or whatever of your technical contact is engineering contact, your business contact. And we're going to put that puts in and gets pinned so that you can go, right, these are the people to talk to if we have to really talk to about it. The problem with having, it's okay if you've got a bigger company, but we're only 55, 60 people. So it's whoever is in on the day. Because I did have in the training people go, yeah, but who is the core team? I go, the core team is whoever needs to be there for fixing that problem, which means the CTO or head of engineering, so that's me or my CTO, or the engineering lead. There might be operations, as I said, risk team, whatever, compliance, other people helping deal with it, and we'll assemble them on what's needed on the day, and who isn't on holiday or ill, or at a conference or something like that, because all of those, so it's really hard to say, but the important bit is the more senior people decide very quickly who's the contacts and shoves it in.
so again, it could be up the Teams channel and people get invited with the
Yeah. Yeah.
So 60 people.
Correct, and that is always an issue. And people were posting in one of the incidents, were posting straight to a tech team channel, at which point I copied it and said, no, we're chatting to this in incident management, copied the message and posted it into the incident channel. So it was time-stamped on when they did it. And everyone moved over very quickly instead of trying to talk to developers directly. So it's really cool. Yeah.
How many people have you sort of targeted to say? Because like maybe if you're bigger, maybe you need more, maybe if you're smaller, maybe you need less.
How many people? I was going to repeat I've got to repeat the question. That's my habit that I forgot to do, actually. So how many people do you need to start doing incidents? So how big does a company need to be? Yeah.
How much would you change the process if you were making it?
Right. So in our sense, because we've got 60 people, you can be more kind of agile about it. Huddle, we had about double that amount, and we had a permanent security officer full-time. Whereas we have a part-time chief information security officer, a consultant who would be involved, but he might not be available. So we have to be more flexible at that point, whereas at Huddle, chief security guy would be straight in. If he's not on holiday, he's now running it. And he'd be the incident manager. And it was pretty much dictated on that, and then it would be this, and then it would be this person. And you had a chain of command that you could immediately go boom, boom, boom. With less people in the company, we're more going to be flexible on that to just be reactive on the day. If we find it doesn't work, we'll change it. And that's the most important bit. The problem that a lot of people have with this kind of thing is they try and get their incident plan absolutely gold-plated perfect. Your best thing to do is have tested it and rehearsed it and go with it. And then every time you do it, it will get better. And the ones at Huddle at the start were pretty ropey, and by the end it was really slick and everyone knew what to do. So it just gets there in the exact same way as developing your software gets there. You fix bugs, you change it, you refactor, you make it better. And you do the same with processes like this, but if you never start, it will never be there to be improved upon. So I hope that answers the question. It's a bit woolly, yeah. It's all subjective. Sorry.
So when Slack went down, and obviously that's a huge part of your team's collaborating, have you had any, similar problems with like your observability tool chain as well? So do you guys run that live as well? Do you decide to move that at the same time as the rest of your application? Like you don't know what's going on if you can't see stuff, right? So how do you guys work around that?
So the question was, given that Slack went down, that caused an issue in the company. What about our observability tools? So logging, auditing, things like that, APM, performance monitoring. At the moment, to be honest, we have App Insights in both regions, logging the stuff from that region into App Insights in that region. If we were to lose a region, we probably can't get to App Insights. If we were to lose a region, I don't care about App Insights to some extent, because I'm going to have to move everyone to the other region. So the question is whether you would lose the worrying one with Azure, if anyone's on Azure, is Azure has AD. AD is how you manage the platform. That's how you get into App Insights. That's how you get permitted. If you ever lost AD in the inability to log in, and by the way, it's happened, Azure has managed to cock up its AD infrastructure so you couldn't log in for half an hour, right? You stop being able to log in a new browser into App Insights to find out why things aren't working. And the reason it's not working is because you can't log in and it's failed to start recognizing AD things. You're really in a bit of a pickle there, because there's certain services in Azure which are not region failover, and they try and make them as secure as possible. So AD is one of their highest priorities, because the AD they're using in Azure is pretty much the same as they use for Office 365. And if they cock it up, they've just cut everyone out of their email. So the one advantage, and this is a really lazy response, lazy recordings, really. Lazy response is, the one thing I've seen with cloud that helps, apart from it goes down a lot less often than a data center, is when it goes down, your customers are probably having problems with everything. Like multiple services that they use are now not available. And it's much easier to have a conversation with them about, well, it's this, that, and they go, yeah, well, that's why we can't use this, that, and the other, right, as well, right? So you get a lot less of the blame than you used to get when you had a data center and there was a network issue in the data center and it's only you who was unavailable. But that isn't a real solution, but it at least makes the conversation a bit easier with the customers. So. Any more questions?
You have a slide with a bullet point that said you don't have a backup unless you restore from it.
Yeah. Right, if you back up a database or your code base and you back it up to a file, to a tape, to a DVD, whatever it is that you happen to have backed it up to, if you've never taken that backup and tried to restore it somewhere, then you don't know you've written it correctly. So say you did a backup that, because this is in Azure, is our SQL servers are secured. They have certificates on them, so the data is encrypted. The backup gets encrypted as well. If you were to take the raw data file for that backup, which you can't get hold of because Azure won't let you, and moved it to another server, and you tried to restore from it, you wouldn't be able to do it because it hasn't got the certificate to decrypt it. Right? So that used to happen with backup tapes. They were encrypted. If you ever lost the password for that tape, there's no chance you were going to get the data back. So if that password was saved somewhere in the local key store on that machine or whatever, and that's the only way it got the restore going, you could not restore onto a different box. So that's what I mean by, until you've restored something from a backup, you're never sure the backup has got everything. And in fact, that's a technical reason why. The other one is you weren't backing up what you thought you were backing up. So that when you restored it, you haven't got everything you thought. So that's the other reason you need to restore from that backup, is to make sure you are backing up the right stuff.
So once you test your backup,
then you're fine. But if you can, automate it so you're doing it every week that you're testing your backups. Because if you do that, and the way you do it, by the way, is, or can do it, is you restore the database, you then anonymize the crap out of it, and then that becomes a developer database that can be used for development work with a suitable amount of data in it, but completely anonymized. And if you do that, then every developer, every week, is downloading the new version and testing that the backup worked. Because it won't be there with the right schemas and everything in it if it's not there. So now your developers are checking that your backups have worked by doing an automated job that just gives them a developer copy every once a week. And now everyone's happy. You've solved loads of problems in one. So, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for coming up to floor 6. And those who asked the question, it's a very good book. I advise you come and collect one. And anyone who hasn't asked a question and you want to read it, it's really good as well. It's a murder mystery with a young kid who's a bit OCD or Asperger's level, solving the mystery. It's really good. It's superb. So it won a Whitbread Book of the Year award. So it was a really good book. It's fun to read as well. It's not just serious. Thank you very much. And don't forget to put lots of greens in the box, the evaluation tickets. You're happy to put reds in if you didn't enjoy it. I'd rather be honest and find out about it.